Take it easy. Take it easy.
All right, everybody, welcome in to another episode in which we're going to sit down and discuss an easy question. I'm joined today by Tony Zuma
Hello, hello.
and our good buddy Michael Schlinder.
Hello, I'm back.
He's back.
Good to have you back, Michael.
So our topic today, I think this is a fun one because I've had to change. I mean, having grown up in the church, I've had to change my opinion about this one a lot over the years. But the question is this: in the Bible, and the Bible is a big book, and there's a lot of people doing lots of different stuff. Who should we be looking up to? If there's such a thing as a biblical hero, as like a Sunday school character that you're like, I want to be like this person. Who should we be looking up to the Bible, and why? And I guess by extension, who should we not be looking up to in the Bible? So let's get it rolling like this. Tony, Michael, were there characters in the Bible that growing up in church or in whatever arena that you were told to view as a hero, or you did view as a hero, and then later had to change your opinion of that character?
I'll be the first one to be honest. When it comes to my childhood, not many memories persist over time. Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, Sunday school is a thing. I know I did I was raised in it for sure. I did what was it? The Boy Scouts of the church. What's that called?
The Defenders
Oh,
of the Faith.
yeah, something like that. For me to remember a specific hero from childhood, that's gonna be a loaded question for me because anything having to do with Sunday school is usually a red flag for me.
Am I
So I will
triggering
pivot
something?
that exactly. It's like Sunday school. Oh, I hate that. I think I mentioned this in a previous episode. Like the Sunday school Christianity, that mentality of like,
Mm.
oh yeah, I'm a Christian because I was raised as a Christian. My family's Christian, and so I'm Christian. And it's like there's no difference between someone who was raised as a Christian versus someone who was raised elsewhere. Like, is that truly what you believe? Is that truly who you are? And that's a tangent, so I won't go off of that. Michael, I'll let you answer this man's question.
I think it's hard to pick one because there's a lot, especially when you're talking Sunday school and I don't know, like your 6-year-old boy in Sunday school. What's the coolest story? Samson. Samson's the coolest story. And so it's like, yes, crush your enemies.
Yeah.
That like, for the Lord type of thing. I think
Mhm.
also pretty much any judge when you really get down to it.
I mean, he had
Um,
incredible hair, right?
yeah.
And he was really good with the ladies. How is that not a hero?
I've come to realize that Samson is just like Bible Hercules. He's just like
Basically,
he's
yeah.
Bible Gilgamesh. You just take the classic ancient view of like a hyper masculine man's man, and he gets any woman that he wants, and he gets anything that he wants, and he can kill anyone that he wants. And this is the peak of humanity. That's that's definitely Samson in the Bible.
Yeah.
And isn't it kind of ironic that, for those who truly understand the whole story, it takes what the world sees as strong and the Hercules of what Greek mythology was, and it just flips it completely upside down because this dude's life literally came crashing down, right? Like all his strength was not for anything, And so there's even for people who obviously are not biblical heroes, I mean, there's a lot of really good lessons there.
Yeah, the whole thing with Samson is I grew up in Sunday school, and so we were kind of told to view his action as a Holy Spirit inspired act to a self-sacrificial act, and the dude literally commits suicide and then
Mhm.
causes mass genocide. It was like there's a
Yep.
line in there that says he killed many more people in his suicide than he did when he was alive.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
great. Yes. That I want to do that one day. I want to be
Ooh,
blinded because I trusted a woman that I shouldn't have trusted and then kill myself and everyone around me. Sounds good.
terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, Samson is, I mean, that's probably the biggest example that sticks
Mhm.
out to me in the book of Judges. Like Judges is the anti it's like what's the word I'm looking for? Judges is the book in the Bible that if you hadn't caught on already, that the Bible is not trying to provide you with moral guidelines alone by looking at the
Yeah,
case studies of these characters' lives. Judges will convince you of that if you actually read it.
absolutely.
Because these are like, yes, these are the leaders and the heroes of Israel, but they are progressively worse and worse and worse. Like the people in Judges have all gone and they've turned and rebelled against God and done their own thing. But now even their leaders are rebels. Their leaders are like increasingly violent. They are increasingly distant from Yahweh. So the whole like arc of the story of Judges is to show you that by the end of it, the Israelite people that were called to be a city on a hill, they were called to be a light to the world, a kingdom of priests. They've now become no different than anyone else, all the way up to their leadership, which
Yeah.
then sets you up for like, we need a king. That's the line at the end of Judges. Like,
Yeah.
in
So
those days, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. That line repeats 4 times
Yeah.
at the end of Judges. So yeah, Samson for sure. Does anyone else stick out to you guys when I ask that question?
I think like another one for me, and this wasn't even a Sunday school thing. It was just I was a left-handed kid. Well, I still am. Not a kid though. Lefty. And so the left-handed judge, Ehud,
Ehud,
like,
yeah.
yeah. But he's literally just an assassin who shows up and stabs a king in the gut while he's taking a dump or something.
Well,
Or
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 something like
they
that.
think he's taking a dump. It's something
There's
like that.
there's
very
poo
typical.
involved for sure in that story. Yeah, Ehud, I mean, at least he escapes without you knowing for certain what his moral character was like.
Yeah.
He's just kind of like, and then this guy stood up and stood against this oppressor of the Israelite people.
Yeah.
And then did this crazy stuff. And then it just moves on.
Yeah.
Samson he's not so lucky. You really get a clear picture of how messed up this dude is.
I was just thinking because you had a good transition sentence before talking about the end of Judges moving into then like First and Second Samuel and the Kings. There was no king in Israel, and then they get some kings. And the first 3, you get Saul, that's bad. You get David, he's better. And that's another one of those Sunday school ones where it's like David, he's the ultimate worshiper.
Yeah.
And then you
that's
read
very
most
true.
of his stories, and a lot of them really suck. And then you
Yeah.
get Solomon, who's another one where it's like, oh, the wisest guy.
Mm.
What a
How
wonderful
many wives did he have?
Yeah. And just you find it looks like he had like tremendously like backbreaking taxes on the people while he was at it,
Absolutely.
and was building temples to other gods. And so then you also find out, boy, Solomon wasn't really one to follow
No,
after much
yeah.
either.
I mean, didn't God warn them? Like, you say you want a king, but you don't actually want a king,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah, Solomon goes and does all the things that God warned the people through Samuel a king would do. Like, he does all of them. And then, in fact, the narrator in First Kings goes out of his way to describe Solomon in Pharaoh terms. Like, there's a lot of parallels between what Pharaoh did in the land to what Solomon goes and does. So he ends up being more like the single greatest antagonist in the Old Testament, more like that than he is like the ideal king or anything like that. Yeah, I think the uncomfortable reality is that so many, like, maybe you don't have to abandon a character as being irredeemable, or like there's nothing I can learn from this character whatsoever. Maybe you don't have to go that far, but the uncomfortable reality, for me at least, as I've gotten older and spent more time in the Word, is that a lot of these characters who were held up as these, like, the epitome of a person of faith or a person after God's heart. All these little things they did in their life you should follow after. You should follow in their footsteps. Man, there are just a bunch of flawed characters in the Bible. Just a bunch of flawed people. And you brought it up. You brought it up, Michael. It's like Saul, clearly flawed. But then even David is held up as being like the model of a man of faith. And the uncomfortable thing, again, is that he was, for so much of his life, he was. But even then, he does the thing. Even then, he goes the way of everyone else. I think of Abraham. I think of what a mixed bag this guy was.
Yeah, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were the ones that popped into my head after thinking about it for a bit.
Yeah. Abraham is like, it's like you get like a 50-50. Like, he'll go and do this wonderful act of faith and trust in God. And then he'll be like, and now I'm going to speed God's promises along
Woe is me.
by raping my slave woman. Like, this will go well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Isaac does he does almost the exact same things as his dad does in his really short narrative. Jacob, though,
Mhm.
you can pretty close to write off anything that Jacob did. He did almost nothing good. There's a couple
Gosh.
moments where you can say, like, okay, he started to get it here. But for
Yeah.
the most part, this is a guy who, from the very beginning, he's like a human representation of everything that goes wrong with humanity from the garden temptation in Genesis 3
Mhm.
on. Like he's a deceiver and he's a liar and he's gonna trick and run away and avoid confrontation, and is the only thing that teaches him a lesson is when somebody starts tricking and deceiving him in turn. Yeah, Jacob is he might be at the very top of my list of
Yeah.
someone who is
Yeah.
viewed as a biblical hero. And it's like, what can we learn from this story of Jacob's life? What you should
Yeah.
learn is that this guy sucks and you shouldn't be doing what he did. Like,
God is really, really faithful.
but like anyone else, like Samson for me is a home run answer there, because he is, of all of the judges, he's the one that is held up as this great example, or at least he's the one who's held up in Sunday school stories. Jacob, I think, is a home run answer there. Anyone else stick out to you guys? All right, I've got one more. Gideon.
Oh,
Yep.
Gideon. Yeah.
I mean, the big thing that a lot of people know from Gideon, and this was my introduction to Gideon in a church setting, was the whole putting out the fleece thing.
Mhm.
For anyone who's not familiar with the whole putting out the fleece thing, there's this moment in Gideon's story where God tells him to do something. He says, well, God, if this is really what you're saying, then I'm going to put out this fleece, this lamb's fleece. And if it's really you speaking, then I want it to be when the ground is all covered with dew the next morning. I want the fleece to be dry. And then it happens. And then he goes, well, I want to be extra certain that it's you speaking, God. So I'm going to put this fleece out and then do the opposite thing. So make the fleece all wet with dew and make all the ground around it dry. I might be getting the order mixed up there, but effectively that happens again. And then Gideon obeys and goes into overwhelming odds and has the whole 300 against this massive army thing. And it's all super cool. And God uses him to free the people. And it's great. But man, you read the story of this guy's life. This is a dude that was going to find any excuse to not obey God and doing the hard things.
Mhm.
God told him repeatedly, and he's like, God, are you sure about this? And God's like, yes, I'm sure about this. He's like, God, can you double confirm it? And God's like, yes, I'll double confirm it. That had already happened. Like he'd already gotten confirmation to God once. And then when God tells him to go into battle, it's like, how about I do this, like this thing that requires a physical miracle for you to confirm that I should actually do it? And then God does it. He's like, okay, how about you do the opposite miracle just in case that was a fluke? And then God does it. Really was pushing the boundary of testing Yahweh. And in the narrative, it's just a picture of a leader of God who, compared to like the Joshuas, because Joshua is right before the Gideon and Judges, compared to Moses, compared to these moments like in Joseph, and I think Joseph will probably come up again later. These lives of people who like had this radical trust in God, radical trust in the face of overwhelming odds. Gideon is like, oh, okay, this is not what we would hope for from a leader of the people of God, a leader of this kingdom of priests that's meant to be a blessing to all nations. This is like, he's a severely mixed bag. And in the narrative, putting out a fleece is something that I was introduced to as a way of like, here is a nice thing you can put into your tool belt as a way to determine the secret will of God. Like if you're not sure what God is saying, you can test him. Like, God, do this thing to confirm that it's really you. Which, I mean, okay, but in the narrative of Gideon, it has nothing to do with Gideon figuring out the secret will of God. He knew exactly what God was telling him to do.
Yeah.
But he was looking for some way out. So Gideon is another one that I've had to have a pretty severe readjustment of my view of him.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, ironically, it's very easy for us to identify and locate all these people in the Bible who are not super biblical and wholesome and good. I just think of a number of people out there who definitely are not as familiar with the Bible as we are. They might not be used to hearing Christians talk about biblical figures like this. And that's something that, I personally find very refreshing. Like, we're not afraid to call out what things are in reality and who these people were historically. It's not just a Sunday school character, but these people existed and they made choices. And the poor choices they made were recorded for a reason, you know? And I think that's great. And so the other side of that, what would be someone that we can actually look up to? Someone who actually is a hero for whatever reason, right? Is that what you were leading
Yeah,
us
you
to?
got it, man. You got it. If there are these characters who are not heroes, like explicitly in the biblical narrative, are not portrayed as people that you should replicate, who is, in your guys' mind now, a character that where you are in life, your understanding of the Bible, your understanding of God, your understanding of what it means to be a human, what is a character that you feel like you have a greater appreciation for in terms of being a hero than you did before? And by hero, I don't necessarily mean perfect, right?
Mhm. Yeah, of
We don't
course.
have to have like, it's okay to be a mixed bag because we can still learn from the positive part of the mixed bag. But who are characters that now, where you guys are at in life, that you view as that is a guy who that's a person I want to replicate?
Yeah, for me, my mind goes right away. Speaking of the name Saul, right? We were talking about an Old Testament Saul, and I'm going into the New Testament now, right? Paul, who is Saul in the New Testament as well. But I think that's a really very easy go-to. And what you were just talking about, Nate, of course, not every aspect of the person's life is going to be what we model, because when you look at Saul early on, I know that there's this might be funny to you guys, but I definitely have had conversations where it's like, oh yeah, wasn't Saul one of the 12 apostles? He was one of the 12 who followed Jesus, and that's why he wrote most of the New Testament. And you can't blame people for making that assumption because he did write most of the New Testament. So it's like, man, biblical hero, definitely this guy. Where unless you are in Acts and you really, take some time to hear who this guy really was, he persecuted Christians. And you guys could tell me to what nth degree of persecution, but my understanding is like he hunted these guys down. He was fearsome amongst the early church community. His name alone would make people go into hiding. And he was the complete opposite of a Christian, right?
No, I think you're representing that pretty well.
Yeah. And so for me, instinctively, I want to say Saul because there comes a time when he literally gets struck off his high horse, right? He gets struck blind. God pretty much said, hey, I had enough of your ways here. They're not my ways, that's for sure. And so he had to go down the road to Damascus and really understand, there's something so much more going on here that I am building that is at a foundational level. And it would be great if you're a part of it, but you can't just be a part of it overnight, right?
Yep.
And so I'm gonna give you the shortened version because I've already put a lot of time into Saul just now. But Saul originally was one of my favorite people because of that transition of coming from a terrible human being to one of the strongest leaders of the early church. Absolutely. But some minor characters that for me in today stand out to me are Ananias and Barnabas. And for those of you who aren't familiar with these names, because they're for someone who's not super into it, maybe have heard of them. But Ananias was, from what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, because my memory is not the best. I've already established that earlier. But Ananias was the person that God directed Saul to. It's like, hey, you think that you know what's going on. Let me knock you off your high horse. I'm literally going to strike you blind. Go to this city, and there will be someone who you can actually trust to receive you. And that was Ananias. And the thing is, once more, the reason why I wanted to talk a little bit about how fearsome Paul was, or Saul at this point, is because no Christian who truly believed Jesus and truly made that choice of, hey, I know I'm supposed to be a good Jew, but I'm going to betray everything, like in the eyes of my family or this new person. Like, no one would have trusted Paul, right? Like, this dude is just going to trick me. You know, you were talking about tricks earlier. Like, he's just trying to figure out where the church leaders are, and he's going to use me to dismantle the church from the inside out. I can only imagine some thoughts like that would be going through his head. Barnabas also fits right into it, because my understanding is Ananias didn't bring Paul straight to the early church leaders, but he's like, you know what? I have a buddy Barnabas, and maybe he can help me figure out what God wants us to do here. And it was like the two of them together. If it wasn't for Ananias, and if it wasn't for Barnabas and them working together and them really seeking God and really trying to ascertain like the inner heart of this person who should be their enemy, if it wasn't for those two guys, you wouldn't have had Paul. You never would have had this person who became so revolutionary to the way Christianity is today, you know? And so those are two of my big heroes.
I was actually going to mention Barnabas as well. I really do like his story quite a bit. I don't think I'd add anything much to what you've already said. The part I like about him is that it seemed like it was largely his job to sort of present Saul/Paul to the church as someone they could accept as one of
Yeah.
them
They can
after
trust
he's
me.
been, persecuting them and maybe is the reason some of their friends got killed or
Yeah.
family. And
Yeah.
so that's something. And for Barnabas, maybe some of his own buddies were the ones who got killed. So it really is that story. It's a story with a whole lot of forgiveness and
Yes. Yeah.
reconciliation that's built into it naturally. So Barnabas, I think, is a character that has a really beautiful heart that way. And I think you see it again a little bit later. It's one of those stories like later in Paul, one of the few times where you're like, oh, that doesn't seem quite right in terms of like things you want to emulate. And it's where Barnabas
John
and
Mark.
they have this
Mm.
disagreement over John Mark. I think something like John Mark flaked out on them. And so then was it the second missionary journey is where they split?
Yes.
I think so.
And so Paul was absolutely not going to have it. He's like, you can't trust this guy.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Barnabas thinks that he can.
It's like, dude, I trusted you.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. And that's why I love him so much as a character, as like part of the story is very much he was willing to, I don't know if you'd call it gamble. I don't know how much or to what degree you would say that he was gambling on this. Maybe
Mhm.
kind of, maybe a little bit was. Who knows? On Saul, Paul, I mean, he's doing it again with no. I'm gonna trust John Mark again. I'm gonna give him another shot on this, and we're gonna. He had his own sort of missionary journey that we don't get to hear about, going and visiting the churches Barnabas and John Mark go and are doing essentially what Paul is doing elsewhere. I love the character of Barnabas for that.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a Levite. Barnabas was. His name was Joseph, and they gave him the nickname Bar Nabas, which is Bar as the son of in Hebrew, and Nabas is like consolation or encouragement,
Yeah.
which
Son of
tells you
encouragement.
something about how he was viewed. This is a guy who was born from encouragement to them in the early church. Yeah, man. The whole Saul being accepted into the early church thing, that's like, to me, like a prime example of how dense the Bible is.
Yeah.
Because there's so
Absolutely.
much there, and then it's just like, and then Barnabas introduced him to the church. And you could just skim right over
Yeah.
that, but it's like,
Yeah. No big deal.
yeah, Michael, you brought
And
it up.
everyone
Like,
was cool.
yeah, yeah. Oh, hey, bud, welcome to the church. Like, this is the guy who was directly responsible for the deaths of people they knew, or people they were related to, or people they loved. And man, how much would have gone into that for Ananias to because that is he felt like a vision from God to go do this. So for
Yeah.
Ananias, it's radical trust.
Absolutely.
And then for Barnabas, it's just like a determination, an inward determination to see everyone around him as a human.
Mhm.
And he's seeing, like, he's got to, in that situation, see the humanity of this guy, to be willing to go out on a limb like that, to do what it takes to do the work of reconciliation for this guy in the church. And then because of that, like you said, Tony, like, this is why this guy who started a huge amount of churches in the ancient world, this guy who wrote the majority of the New Testament and really helped us understand a huge amount of the words of the way of Jesus.
Mhm. Yeah, and some of the things that you just said, Nate, absolutely resonate with the core of who I am, especially the core of my belief in, ever since my faith became more than a Sunday school thing, which did happen later in my adult life. It was not something that just because I was raised in the church, Christianity was definitely the way for me. No, I mean, I had to wake up big time in ways that only God could do.
Hmm.
And so something that you were saying though is like how Barnabas, like the reconciliation and having that heart for others and seeing the humanity in others, no matter what label they may or may not have. Man, it, that concept makes my heart beat so much. Like just the idea, and you ask, hey, who are our heroes? And I told you, these two are definitely big heroes, but the why behind it is because that's who I want to be when I'm in the real world. And I say real world, but like the outside world where Christianity isn't looked upon favorably. It's not something to brag about that, oh yeah, I'm definitely a Christian and you should listen to what I have to say. Like any genuine conversation I have with someone never sounds like that. But the heart that these biblical heroes have for me of it doesn't matter what someone has done per se. I mean, without a doubt, there is wisdom, there is discernment, but it's that constant tendency to always go out on a limb for someone in a way that I want to see the good. Whether it's there or not is one thing, but I want to see it. I want to connect with that person. I could be that this person could be so far in the cracks that I can be the only person in their entire lives, or at least their life right now, that shows any kind of light or encouragement or trying to edify this person where they never get that from anyone else. And that's very motivational for me. And so that is why when you ask the question, these two guys and what they pulled off in the midst of, once more, we've said this in previous episodes, just how crazy things actually were, not just in the early church, but just ancient history. Man, I can't imagine the levels of persecution and resentment and anger and all these generational things that are just, we can barely fight against them now. How did they fight against them when it came to this guy who did kill people they know and love, friends and family? And it's very inspiring.
I will say it took me a minute to remember which Ananias you were talking about. You were like,
There are,
you said-
isn't there like three of them?
yeah. There's like Ananias, Sapphira, Ananias.
Yeah,
There's
well,
Ananias,
not
the
that
high
one.
priest that got his
Oh,
butt
yeah.
beat. Oh, like later in Acts, like 23. And I was like, it's not,
yeah.
there's no way he's talking about high priest Ananias. And I was like, oh, right, the Saul Ananias. That makes sense. Yeah.
Although, because that's the Corinthian Ananias, right?
Yeah, that's
In
right.
23?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's debate that maybe he did become a Christian later because it mentions a different high priest or like chief of the synagogue
Yeah.
shortly after. So maybe that butt whooping
Mhm.
turned things around for him. Who knows?
That is what that was my thought. I was like, okay, there's no way Tony looks at Ananias and Sapphira Ananias as a hero. So maybe it
Remember-
was like High Priest Corinthian Ananias. Maybe the fact that he became a Christian, even though it meant losing his station, maybe that's where Tony's
yeah.
going. And I just blanked on the obvious answer, which is,
All good.
Damascus Ananias. All right. Well, Michael, I'm really curious what you're thinking.
Oh, usually I would roll with Joseph, so Old Testament character.
Mm.
And for a lot of the same reasons, I think that Barnabas is inspiring to me in the New Testament. His whole story is ultimately one of doing a whole lot of suffering, and so
Yeah.
his story, we mentioned it really briefly with the coat of many colors. He's his daddy's favorite, and his jealous brothers hatch a plan to straight kill him, which at just the last second they decide maybe not kill him, but we'll leave him in a well and pretend he died and sell him. So he ends up getting sold to Egypt. He has to work for Potiphar, I think his name was,
Yep.
as his slave. He has I don't know, maybe years of time just basically faithfully slaving away for this guy. And the story, I'm trying to remember, it doesn't really say much about like what Joseph might have been thinking or feeling.
Yeah.
But again, he had just been, sold by his own brothers into slavery. And so I can't imagine he wasn't thinking about that very often. You'd expect him to maybe be stewing on it, and maybe have a
the
different
betrayal.
perspective on life.
Yeah.
But his story is basically just one that thinks that would be a horrible, sinful thing to do to his master. And so he tries to just avoid her, run away, basically. She eventually manages to like jump him, essentially. She like catches him. When he wasn't like being careful enough, she like gets a piece of his robe or something like that, lies about him trying to rape her. And then, so he ends up in prison. And so again, you're like, wow, he was being righteous that whole way. But now he's in prison because of this lady lying. And the story continues with sort of like, and the Lord was with him to bless him. He becomes like someone important, I guess, as like a prisoner. I don't know how Egyptian prisons work, that such a thing could occur. He like ends up in charge somehow. Yada yada yada. He ends up in front of Pharaoh eventually because he can interpret dreams. He saves Egypt from a like incoming drought, stocks up food, and eventually his own brothers travel there to get some food from Egypt because they hear that they're the only guys who have anything to buy to eat. And in that particular moment, if Joseph was a different sort of dude, he could have ended, just like straight up ended God's whole plan of redemption for humanity, because he could have straight murdered those suckers, had him killed. He was like second in all of Egypt, like only to Pharaoh. All right, he could have said these, like, kill him, bury him, or I don't know, put him on some pikes, whatever. But instead, he has just like a series of like small, well, not even necessarily small, but he has some tests to kind of see what these guys are like now. And again, just not to make this story super crazy long, because it is, the Old Testament actually takes, that's last part of Genesis takes a long time.
Yeah,
A lot of time on Joseph.
Yeah, it's like 14 chapters.
Yeah, it's they really take some time to tell his story, and I think for good reason. And his brothers they have the correct response, in which they are absolutely terrified, because they, generally speaking, you would expect to be killed for what you did. Anyone with any kind of vengeful heart and with the power to do it would have done it. But he instead is forgiving them. He wants to see his father. He says, I'll take care of you. You can all move here. I've got some land, out west that Egypt will let y'all have. So come on down. And to kind of cap off the story, after Jacob passes away, the brothers kind of come back again. They're like, hey, dad is dead. And we don't know if you were maybe being cool on behalf of our dad. You're not going to like turn around and kill us now, are you? And then, so that kind of Genesis really ends with Joseph like reassuring them, like,
Yeah.
what you did was evil. Like, you intended evil. God had better things in mind. I'm going to take care of you. That's not going to change. You don't have to worry about suffering my wrath,
Yeah, like we spoke about before. I mean, he was killing them with kindness, and
Yeah.
so it really was a Christian approach that you would not have seen in the normal everyday world. You normally would see eye for an eye, and so I completely agree, Michael. I think that, like, if you really, man, just, and Nate, what you were talking about before is just like there's so much density and so many of these characters and so many of these narratives. And it's like, if you really try to take some moments and put yourself in these shoes, like, can you just imagine, like, not just the level of betrayal and that comes with that kind of a situation, but it's your family, it's like, not only are you dealing with a betrayal of people who you should be able to trust, people who you should be able to look up to, these older brothers, right? Who should have his back. These should be the most trustworthy people in your life. But now he's alone. He doesn't have anyone. Everything in his whole world is turned upside down. And the fact that over time and, with just supernatural grace, he's able to really find reconciliation in those kind of moments. Oh man, like, it really does put things in perspective for me, where it's like, if someone can do something like that, what's what I'm dealing with today or last week or last year,
Yeah.
And so I think that's a great example, Michael.
Yeah. That's another one of those places, like with Ananias and Barnabas, where taking the extra step to identify with the character and just attempt to mentally put yourself in their shoes can go a really long way to
Yeah.
increasing, I think, the power of a narrative like that. Yeah. Well, appreciate that, Michael. That was going to be my answer. I'm going to have to pick something else now, I guess.
Robbed him.
Yeah. I got robbed. Yeah. I'll add a little bit to Joseph though, because he's definitely right at the top of my list. And I had, what would you call it? I was fatigued. I had Joseph fatigue from having heard so many things about him in like a church kind of setting, and almost that sense of like, when you hear about something so often, you stop understanding it. You certainly stop appreciating it, like overexposure. And that's where Joseph was for me for a long time, until I spent like a really, really long time, period of years in study in Genesis, and just tracing out what the narrative is doing for you. Because Tony, what you were saying a minute ago, like, Joseph is incredible because it's like, look at how he was able to respond with God's grace in the face of like that level of stuff. So it's like, therefore I can do, like, what more can I do than what I'm expecting of myself right now? It's like, I can do a lot more. But not only that, but look at what God was able to do through Joseph's willingness to trust him.
Yes.
Like, look at the end outcome for Joseph, for his family, for the nation of Egypt, like for the world, like the modern world at that time. It's like the narrative of Genesis goes over and over and over again, like all the way from Genesis 3 to the life of Joseph, where God invites people to trust him and partner with him. And the spoiler alert, but I think after a certain amount of millennia, you can't be spoiled anymore. So the statute of limitations for spoilers of the Bible is definitely up. But the spoiler alert is that every single time a person is given the opportunity to trust God, in an individual's life, at least once they radically choose to not trust God and trust themselves, to do things in their own way, in their own timing, to evaluate right and wrong in their own eyes is some of the language that Genesis uses. So Adam and Eve do that. Cain does that. It looks like Noah's doing great, but then Noah has
Yep.
his moment,
Yep.
You have Abraham, who we talked about how he's a very mixed bag. He has these moments where he radically trusts God in the face of overwhelming odds, but then the pressure gets on in another way, and then he runs and trusts himself and tries to solve the problems in his own way. God makes him this impossible promise, and he trusts God, and then he tries to accomplish that promise in his own timing and in his own way. Isaac does the same thing. Jacob does the same thing. It's constantly trying in his life to manipulate, to trick, to seize, or hint, to wrestle away a blessing that God had always intended for him from the very beginning, which is why he was renamed Israel. Israel means wrestles with God, and that's not necessarily meant to be a positive thing. Like his entire life was wrestling a blessing from God that God had wanted to give him as a gift. So finally you get to Joseph, and it's like fractured family after fractured family after fractured family, like going from Adam and Eve and now Cain and Abel, fractured family. You have Noah and his children, fractured family. You have Abraham's children, fractured family. You have Isaac's children, fractured family between Jacob and Esau. And now we have Jacob's children. And what do we get immediately? We get a fractured family. We get a broken family as people like embrace jealousy or anger. Like they have their Cain and Abel moment where they're jealous and they take their jealousy out through murder, but not quite. And he ends up sold into slavery and going down to Egypt, which is never a good thing in the narrative when you go down to Egypt. It's always a negative thing. But the one thing that is different about Joseph, in the face of like the same story beats over and over and over again, people embracing, evaluating what is right and wrong in their own eyes, people refusing to trust God and his timing, taking matters into their own hands, solving problems in their own way. Joseph refuses to do that. Like he utterly refuses to seize the situation for himself. He refuses to solve it his own way. He refuses to compromise what he believes is true and his values and his morals. And he radically, consistently trusts Yahweh through the entire narrative. So all these little moments where it's like, could he have taken Potiphar's wife and maybe made a power play? Could he have insisted on like cashing in a favor from these men in prison whom he helped out and then whom forgot to help him? Could he have seized vengeance for himself once he's been elevated into this position? Could he have this or that or whatever else over and over and over again? He could have. And these other characters in the story, whether it's Cain, whether it's Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, these other characters have seized the situation for themselves. And Joseph just refuses to do that. He just trusts God's timing. He's faithful, and he's the one character. It's like the first time the Spirit of God is said to be on somebody is with the life of Joseph. This guy who just, from the deepest parts of him, he trusts God's timing, which doesn't mean that he's passive and does nothing. It's like he very actively trusts God with his life. And so at the very end of the story, Michael, when you were talking about that moment where the brothers are like, okay, dad's dead now. Are you going to get vengeance on us now that dad's not here to watch? And Joseph says, no, that's not what I'm going to do. He says that you had intentions to do evil, but God's intentions were to do good. And what comes out of Joseph's story is an incredible amount of good. Like for the life of Joseph, for his brothers, for his father, for the nation of Egypt and like the known world at that time in history. It's like a huge amount of good and restoration and like saving help. And it's like this amazing high point at the end of Genesis. You're left very, very optimistic for where the story is going to go from here. And I was like, what was the difference between Joseph's life and Cain and Abel's, Abraham's, Isaac's, Jacob's? Like, what enabled such an incredible amount of good to come out of his life? And it was, from a narrative perspective, it was the fact that he doesn't at any point define right and wrong in his own eyes. He doesn't seize the fruit of defining right and wrong. He embraces Yahweh's vision for how to be human and Yahweh's timing. So for me, I've really had to cultivate a deeper appreciation for Joseph over the years, because not only does the narrative want you to see that he is like the closest thing we've had to the ideal human up to this point in the narrative. It's like I feel like it's staring into a mirror when I read the life of Joseph, but not like, wow, I'm just like Joseph, but I feel like I'm being exposed. I feel like I'm seeing the ways in which I take matters into my own hands, the ways in which the moment things get hairy, I feel like I should solve it for myself. The moments where I feel like I'm deserving of something, or I feel like it's within my rights to hurt another person or to take advantage of another person because I've been taken advantage of. There's so many moments where I define my situation by my own wisdom, by my own evaluation. And Joseph refuses to do it. And what God is able to bring out of the situation is a direct result of Joseph, like, open-handedly trusting him and partnering with him. So it's that place way later where Paul comments on this idea in Romans chapter 8, with the simple idea, and I'll paraphrase, that God is able to take things that are intended for evil and things that are genuinely bad and like negative, and use them for the good for all those who love him and who will trust him. And so Joseph is like, he is the case study of a human being that will love and trust Yahweh, even in the face of situation after situation where he is being hurt, he's being trampled on, he's being taken advantage of. He trusts Yahweh in the face of it. And what I don't mean by that is to say he is passive and he just lets things happen to him. He's very active in his trust in Yahweh, but he refuses to define things by his own wisdom. He refuses to define right and wrong and what's right and wrong in that situation in his own eyes. And that's what makes him different from every other character that you encounter in the Bible up to that point.
Yeah, I think, that's what makes him different than every other human being on earth, right? We have the natural disposition to just figure things out for ourselves. And this is right and this is wrong because it's what I think, it's what I feel,
Yeah.
And so I do think that, we were talking earlier on one of our early episodes of what makes a Christian really a Christian. It's the willingness to see things not just through your own lens. It's the willingness that, I maybe have it figured out. Maybe I don't have to do all this on my own. Maybe there really is someone who's not just more loving than me, but more capable than me. And it's the most intelligent decision to actually open up and pull a Joseph and have that willingness to have open hands and say, look, I'm not sitting here trying to do nothing. I'm not sitting here trying to play a victim card. I think that's how I interpreted some of what you were saying, Nate. He doesn't play the victim, he is very intentional. He steps up to the plate, but he also doesn't play the aggressor. He doesn't fight back in ways that he was in his rights to do, and I mentioned earlier just the idea of, like, you're not only going through a betrayal, but you're going through a betrayal of your family, For those out there who may be listening to this and you have experienced betrayal, or you have experienced, quite frankly, a very crappy family life, I can raise my hand to both of those over numerous different situations. I do think that everything that you just described, Nate and Michael, like it really applies to directly that if someone in that situation can deal with that level of intensity, then maybe there is a reasonable, possible, intelligent choice that we can make that is a Christian way, which is different than a worldly way.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a thought I had as you were sharing that is uh, you don't really see a character quite like Joseph again in the to the same degree until I think you hit Jesus in the New Testament. Um, and even like his story is kind of an is kind of interesting because you have a guy. I mean, we call him Jesus. His Jewish name would have been something closer to Joshua. And so if you're telling a Jewish story about a fellow named Joshua who's, supposedly going to be the king, you're expecting some holy butt whipping to start happening and some land taking and some,
Yeah.
there's supposed to be some like retribution and violence and walls coming down type of situation. But then you see um, Jesus's, kingdom and its like, uh, how would you say it? Like your parameters for victory are very Joseph.
Hmm.
Yeah. Mm.
It's very trust Yahweh in all situations. Um, not be passive in the face of persecution, but loving and faithful in the midst of it. Um, and it seems like the early church really grabbed hold of that
Hmm.
clearly, since that was his teaching. So it's and I can, when you were saying like if this story has sort of the like when family betrays you, Jesus also has like when your best friends betray you, when your entire people betray you. And for him, maybe some of his brothers were part of not going along with him either. So he probably had some family betrayal as well. Um, and I don't know if like I mean maybe in a different podcast episode if we wanted to share our own stories, but I could raise my hand too as regards what does it look like to be betrayed by family and how do you what's like a faithful way to walk that through
Hmm.
and look more like Joseph as opposed to say a Jacob.
Absolutely.
Because I think Jacob even has a little bit of retributive sneakiness
Mhm.
even after what he does to his brother.
Hmm.
That's with Laban as well. But anyway, yeah, maybe that'd be probably a bit more of like a heavy sort of podcast topic.
Mhm.
But if we ever wanted to go there, I feel like we could have some meaningful stories and to share with
I don't know.
people.
That doesn't sound too heavy. It sounds like a very easy, very light thing
Yeah.
that fits into our wheelhouse, you know?
Yeah, good stuff bringing that up, Michael. I was going to ask kind of as bait, but I mean we're nearing the end of our hour here, but I was going to ask as bait if you guys could perceive any parallels between the life of Joseph and the life of Jesus, but
Mhm.
you're way ahead of me, dog.
Beat you to the punch again.
It's definitely very intentional. There's the characters that demonstrate that kind of consistency and trust in God. I don't think there is another character like up until Jesus that is like an embodiment of trusting in Yahweh's timing and in Yahweh's way, aside from Joseph. David is so close until he's not,
Yeah.
and he's just not anymore. But for so much of his life, he is. No, but he is even more of a case study for a different sort of purpose. But Jesus's life is like it heavily parallels Joseph's life, and that sense of like, yes, he is God, but he's also human, and he's showing us the way. He's showing us the way to the truest form of humanity.
Yeah.
This is where I mentioned earlier that Joseph was maybe the closest thing to a true human that we get in the Bible up to that point. Jesus' life is the true human. Paul calls him the new Adam, or the new Adam, and Adam in Hebrew means human. So he is the new kind of human, the first of a new humanity, a new creation. And his life is as Joseph's was. It's an embodiment of radical trust in the Father. So even in those moments in Gethsemane, where he says, I don't want to do this, but not my will, but yours. I'm going to trust your evaluation of my actions and my life and what I should or shouldn't be doing. We're going to do it your way over my way every time, if it ever comes down to a contradiction. So, yep. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Good topics today, guys. Just all this talking of these heroes and these people who aren't heroes. They all have a lot of stuff in common, and that's the suffering that they went through and the approaches that they took to respond to that suffering. That's where they drastically differed.
Yeah, this was a great time, guys. Thank you for your perspective. I feel like I've been reminded of some stuff, and I've learned some stuff, and I guess that's what this is all about.
Absolutely. Yeah, and thank you again, Michael, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Always
Our
love your brand of processing. Personal favorite of mine. All right, y'all. Well, until next time, keep it easy, and we'll be back with another easy question before too long.